The last shovelful of dirt had barely settled on Richard Hartwell's grave when Victoria began her assault. Maya pulled into the familiar circular driveway of the sprawling Tudor mansion she had called home for 8 years, only to find her stepmother standing in the doorway, with 3 large cardboard boxes stacked beside her perfectly manicured hands. Victoria Hartwell cut an imposing figure even in morning attire. Her jet-black hair was pulled into a severe chignon, not a strand out of place despite the October wind that rustled the oak trees lining the estate. She wore a tailored black Armani suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, paired with pearl earrings that caught the afternoon light. Her cold blue eyes held no trace of the grief that had consumed Maya for the past week since her father's sudden heart attack. I'm curious where you're all watching from today. Are you dealing with family drama in your own state? Or maybe watching this unfold from somewhere completely different? Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, because this story is about to get wild no matter where you are. Maya stepped out of her 15-year-old Honda Civic, still wearing the simple black dress she had bought for the funeral. At 24, she possessed the kind of understated beauty that her stepmother had always seemed to resent. Chestnut hair fell in natural waves past her shoulders, and her green eyes, so much like her late father's, were still red-rimmed from crying. She was petite next to Victoria's imposing 5'9" frame, making her seem even more vulnerable as she approached the woman who had married her father 6 years ago. "Your things are in these boxes," Victoria announced without preamble, gesturing toward the cardboard containers with a dismissive wave of her diamond-encrusted hand. The 3-carat wedding ring Richard had given her caught the light, a painful reminder of happier times when Maya still believed her stepmother might eventually come to care for her. Maya stared at the boxes in confusion. "What things, Victoria? What are you talking about?" Victoria's perfectly glossed lips curved into what could generously be called a smile, though it held all the warmth of a midwinter storm. "Your belongings, dear. Clothes, books, whatever little trinkets you've accumulated over the years. I've taken the liberty of packing them for you." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. "Packing them? Victoria, I live here. This is my home." "Was your home," Victoria corrected, her tone as sharp as the designer heels she wore. "Past tense, Maya. Your father is dead, and this house, along with everything in it, belongs to me now. You were never legally adopted, which means you have absolutely no claim to any of this." The cruelty in Victoria's voice was breathtaking. Maya had always known her stepmother merely tolerated her presence, but she had never imagined this level of calculated coldness. During the funeral just hours earlier, Victoria had played the grieving widow perfectly, accepting condolences with appropriate tears and heartbroken whispers about how much she would miss her beloved Richard. Now, standing in the shadow of the home where Maya had spent her teenage years and early 20s, Victoria's mask had completely fallen away. "You can't be serious," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind rustling through the maple trees that lined the property. "Dad would never have wanted this. He loved me." Victoria laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the stone facade of the mansion. "Oh, my dear naive little girl. Your father was a sentimental fool who felt sorry for you after your mother died. But sentiment doesn't trump law, and legally speaking, you're nothing more than a stranger who's been living in my house for far too long." The front door swung open and Derek Hartwell emerged, Victoria's 26-year-old son from her first marriage. He shared his mother's sharp features and cold eyes, though his were a muddy brown rather than blue. Derek had never bothered to hide his disdain for Maya, viewing her as an obstacle to his inheritance. He wore an expensive charcoal suit that emphasized his tall, lanky frame, and his sandy hair was styled with the kind of precision that required daily salon visits. "Still here, charity case?" Derek asked with mock surprise, adjusting his platinum cufflinks. "I thought Mother made it clear that visiting hours were over." Maya felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not in front of these people who had already taken so much from her. "Derek, please. Your stepfather just died. Can't we at least pretend to be civil?" "Stepfather?" Derek's eyebrows shot up in theatrical surprise. "Oh, that's rich. Maya, sweetie, Richard was never my stepfather. He was my mother's second husband, which makes him absolutely nothing to me. And that makes you even less than nothing." Victoria nodded approvingly at her son's words. Derek understands the situation perfectly. You're not family, Maya. You never were. Richard felt sorry for you and let you play house for a few years, but the game is over now. Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the boxes containing what remained of her childhood and young adulthood. Everything that mattered to her, every memory and keepsake, reduced to 3 cardboard containers sitting on the stone steps like unwanted garbage. Please, she said, hating how small and desperate her voice sounded. I just buried my father today. Can't you give me a few days to figure out where to go? I promise I won't be any trouble. Victoria's expression didn't soften even slightly. Your pathetic attachment to this place isn't my problem. You should have thought about your future before assuming you belonged here. I want you gone before morning, or I'll call the police and have you removed as a trespasser. Derek pulled out his phone and began recording. This is going to make great content for my social media, he said with genuine enthusiasm. The day we finally cleaned house and got rid of the dead weight. Maya stared at the phone camera, feeling humiliated beyond measure. Her grief was being turned into entertainment, her devastation reduced to content for Derek's privileged friends to laugh at over their expensive cocktails. As she bent to lift the first box, her hand brushed against something in her coat pocket. A business card. She remembered now the distinguished older man who had approached her at the funeral, expressing his condolences and quietly slipping her his card while Victoria held court with the other mourners. Jonathan Pierce, attorney at law, the card read. She palmed it carefully, not wanting Victoria or Derek to notice. The boxes were heavier than they looked, filled with books, photo albums, and the few pieces of jewelry her father had given her over the years. Maya struggled to load them into her small car, while Victoria and Derek watched from the doorway, neither offering to help. As she placed the last box in her back seat, Victoria called out one final cruelty. Don't even think about coming back, Maya. I'm changing all the locks tonight. This chapter of your pathetic little life is over. Maya drove away without looking back, Victoria's laughter echoing in her ears. But in her pocket, Jonathan Pierce's business card felt like a small beacon of hope in the darkness that had suddenly consumed her world. Maya spent that first night in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, trying to sleep in the cramped back seat of her Honda, while her entire life sat boxed up around her. The autumn air was bitter cold, seeping through the car windows and making her shiver despite the wool coat that had been her father's last birthday gift to her. She kept checking her phone, half expecting some message of regret from Victoria, some acknowledgement that maybe she had been too hasty in her cruelty. Instead, she woke to find Victoria had already begun her social media campaign. The Instagram post showed Victoria standing in the mansion's marble foyer, arms crossed triumphantly, with the caption that made Maya's stomach turn. Finally spring cleaning the house and getting rid of unwanted guests. Sometimes you have to be ruthless to protect what's yours. New chapter starts now #blessed #widow life #moving forward. The post already had dozens of likes and comments from Victoria's circle of wealthy friends, each one praising her strength and resilience. Maya scrolled through them with growing horror, realizing that Victoria had crafted a narrative where she was the victim who had generously allowed Maya to stay far longer than necessary. Her phone rang, jolting her from the nightmare of public humiliation. It was her part-time job at the campus bookstore, her manager calling to let her know that someone had contacted them claiming Maya was no longer a student and therefore ineligible for work-study employment. Maya's heart sank as she realized Victoria's reach extended even to her meager source of income. By 8 in the morning, Maya found herself back at the mansion, hoping to retrieve a few items Victoria had missed. She also needed to access the small safe in her bedroom where her father kept important documents, including her birth certificate and social security card. Without those, she couldn't even apply for jobs or housing. Victoria answered the door wearing a flowing silk robe that probably cost more than Maya's monthly expenses. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the early hour, and she held a crystal champagne flute filled with what looked like a mimosa. Celebrating already, apparently. I thought I made myself clear yesterday, Victoria said, not bothering to invite Maya inside. You're no longer welcome here. I just need to get some documents from my room, Maya explained, trying to keep her voice steady. Important papers that belong to me. Victoria's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Your room? Darling, there is no your room. There's the guest bedroom where Richard foolishly allowed you to stay, and I've already begun converting it into my new walk-in closet. The expansion has been long overdue. Behind Victoria, Maya could see into the foyer where workers were already removing family portraits that included Maya. Her high school graduation photo, the picture of her and her father at her college orientation, even the casual family shots from various holidays. All of them were stacked in a pile near the door like unwanted garbage. "Please," Maya said, her voice breaking slightly. "Just let me get my birth certificate and social security card. They're in the safe upstairs." Victoria sipped her mimosa thoughtfully. "Oh, you mean this safe?" She reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a small fireproof box that Maya recognized immediately. "I had a locksmith open it this morning. Fascinating what your father kept in there." Maya's heart raced as Victoria opened the box with deliberate slowness. Inside were not just Maya's documents, but bank statements, insurance papers, and what looked like legal documents she had never seen before. "Your birth certificate is here," Victoria said, holding up the official document. "But I'm afraid I can't give it to you. You see, I need to verify that you're not trying to make any fraudulent claims on Richard's estate. I'll be holding on to all of these for safekeeping." The cruelty was breathtaking in its calculation. Victoria was systematically cutting off every avenue Maya might have to rebuild her life, ensuring she remained powerless and dependent. The sound of expensive car engines in the driveway announced the arrival of Derek and his friends. Maya recognized them immediately, the entitled offspring of the city's wealthiest families. There was Harrison Blackwood, whose father owned half the downtown real estate, and Sophia Chun, whose trust fund was larger than most people's lottery winnings. They emerged from a gleaming black Range Rover, designer shopping bags in hand, clearly planning to make a day of what they saw as entertainment. Well, Derek called out as he approached the front steps, his voice carrying that particular tone of mockery that privileged young men seemed to perfect in boarding school. "Look who's back, begging for scraps." Harrison, a tall young man with perfectly coiffed brown hair and the kind of tan that came from winter vacations in the Hamptons, pulled out his phone immediately. "Is this the charity case you were telling us about? The one who thought she actually belonged here?" Maya felt her face burn with humiliation as the three of them circled her like predators who had found wounded prey. Sophia, petite and elegant in her designer workout clothes, looked Maya up and down with undisguised disdain. "Oh my God, Derek," she said in a voice dripping with false sympathy. "You weren't exaggerating about how pathetic this is. She's literally wearing the same clothes from yesterday." It was true. Maya had slept in her funeral dress, too exhausted and heartbroken to change, and now she stood before these people who had never known a day of genuine hardship, looking every inch the desperate homeless girl they wanted her to be. Victoria watched the exchange with obvious satisfaction, sipping her mimosa like she was enjoying morning theater. "Derek, darling, why don't you show your friends the boxes of her belongings? I think they'll find it amusing to see what passes for treasures among the less fortunate." Before Maya could protest, Derek was already opening the boxes in her car, pulling out her possessions for everyone to examine and mock. Her collection of paperback novels, mostly purchased secondhand from thrift stores, drew particular laughter from Harrison. "Look at this," he said, holding up a worn copy of Jane Eyre. "She actually reads these ancient things. Doesn't she know about audiobooks? Oh wait, she probably can't afford the subscription." Sophia discovered Maya's jewelry box, a simple wooden container her father had made for her 13th birthday. Inside were a few inexpensive pieces, mostly gifts from classmates or small items Maya had bought herself with money earned from part-time jobs. "This is so sad," Sophia announced, holding up a simple silver bracelet like it was contaminated. "I spend more on coffee in a week than this entire collection is worth." Derek pulled out Maya's laptop, an older model that had seen her through 4 years of college. The screen was cracked from being dropped, and several keys stuck, but it had been her lifeline to the outside world. "Jesus," Derek said, examining the battered machine. "This thing belongs in a museum." "Maya, sweetie, did you fish this out of a dumpster?" The laptop contained everything important to Maya: her resume, her writing samples, the novel she had been working on for 2 years, hundreds of photos of her and her father. Watching Derek handle it carelessly made her feel physically ill. "Please be careful with that," Maya said, stepping forward. "It has important files on it." Derek's eyes lit up with malicious inspiration. Oh, does it now? Important files. He held the laptop over his head like he was going to drop it. I wonder how important they really are. Maya lunged forward instinctively, but Victoria's voice stopped her cold. Derek, put that down. We're not savages. She can have her little computer. It's not worth anything anyway. But Victoria wasn't finished with her psychological warfare. As Maya carefully returned her belongings to the boxes, trying to ignore the continued commentary from Derek's friends, Victoria delivered her final blow. Oh, Maya, darling, Victoria said with false sweetness. I hope you weren't counting on that college fund Richard set up for you. I'm afraid there's been a complication. Maya's blood turned to ice. What complication? Well, as Richard's legal heir, I've had to review all the accounts he maintained. That education fund, it seems there were some irregularities. The bank needed to freeze the assets pending investigation. Something about potential fraud, though I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Maya stared at Victoria, understanding flooding through her with horrible clarity. The college fund, nearly $8,000 her father had been building since Maya started high school, was her only financial safety net. Without it, she had less than $300 to her name. You emptied it, Maya whispered, the accusation hanging in the air between them. Victoria's smile was as cold as Arctic wind. I've done nothing improper. I simply reported suspicious activity to the proper authorities. If you have legitimate claim to those funds, I'm sure the investigation will clear everything up. Eventually, the police threat, Maya realized, wasn't just about removing her from the house. Victoria was systematically destroying every resource Maya might use to survive independently. Every bridge was being burned with calculated precision. As Maya drove away for the second time, her belongings rattling in the back seat and Derek's laughter echoing in her ears, she felt something inside her begin to harden. The naive girl who had believed family meant unconditional love was dying, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes survival required fighting back. Victoria wanted to destroy her completely, but Maya still had one card Victoria didn't know about. Sitting in her coat pocket, Jonathan Pierce's business card felt like her only remaining lifeline in a world that had suddenly become hostile and cold. 3 days of living in her car had taught Maya things about survival she never wanted to learn. The 24-hour fitness center near the university became her bathroom and shower facility, though she had to time her visits carefully to avoid the staff who were starting to recognize her daily routine. The public library provided warmth during the day and free internet access, but closed at 9, leaving her to face the long, cold nights alone. She had parked behind a closed furniture store, hidden from the main road by a row of dying pine trees. The autumn nights were getting colder, and even with every piece of clothing she owned layered on her body, sleep came in brief, uncomfortable intervals. Her neck ached constantly from the cramped position, and her stomach had stopped growling from hunger, which she knew was a bad sign. Maya's phone had become both her lifeline and her torture device. Every few hours, she found herself checking Victoria's social media, watching her stepmother document her newfound freedom with gleeful abandonment. The latest Instagram story showed Victoria in the mansion's master bathroom, which she was having completely renovated. The marble countertops were being replaced with something Victoria called Carrara Gold, and she was installing a chandelier that cost more than Maya's entire college tuition. Victoria posed next to fabric swatches and paint samples, her caption reading, "Finally making this house feel like home." Sometimes you have to remove the negativity before you can embrace the luxury you deserve. The cruelty was breathtaking. Maya's father had loved that bathroom exactly as it was, had chosen every detail with care when he renovated it 5 years ago. Now Victoria was erasing every trace of Richard's presence as systematically as she had erased Maya herself. But the worst part was the comments section, where Victoria's wealthy friends cheered her on with enthusiasm that made Maya's stomach turn. "You deserve this luxury, honey. Richard would want you to be happy. So brave of you to start fresh. That girl was lucky you let her stay as long as you did." Maya closed the app and dialed the number on Jonathan Pierce's business card for the 3rd time. The first 2 calls had gone to voicemail, but desperation finally overrode her natural reluctance to bother people. "Pierce, Whitman, and Associates," came a crisp female voice. "This is Rebecca speaking." "Hello," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the cold that made her teeth want to chatter. I'm calling for Jonathan Pierce. He gave me his card at my father's funeral. Richard Hartwell's funeral. There was a pause, then the sound of typing. Oh yes, Miss Hartwell. Mr. Pierce has been expecting your call. Can you hold for just a moment? Maya waited, watching her breath fog in the cold car, while classical music played softly through her phone speaker. After what felt like an eternity, a warm male voice came on the line. Maya, this is Jonathan Pierce. I'm so sorry for your loss. Your father was a good man. Something in his tone, a gentleness that Maya hadn't heard since her father's death, made tears spring to her eyes. Thank you, she managed. Mr. Pierce, I don't know if you're aware of what's happened since the funeral, but Victoria has. She's thrown me out of the house. She says I have no legal right to anything. I see, Pierce said quietly. Maya, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you have somewhere safe to stay right now? Maya hesitated. She didn't want to lie, but she also didn't want to appear so desperate that he might not take her seriously. Not really, she admitted finally. I've been staying in my car. The silence stretched long enough that Maya wondered if the call had dropped. Then Pierce spoke again, his voice filled with something that sounded like controlled anger. Maya, I need you to come to my office as soon as possible. There are things about your father's estate that Victoria clearly doesn't understand. Can you be here tomorrow morning at 10? Maya's heart leaped with the first genuine hope she had felt in days. Yes, absolutely. Mr. Pierce, can you tell me what kind of things? Not over the phone, he said firmly. But Maya, I want you to understand something. Your father was a very careful man when it came to legal matters. Very careful. I think Victoria is going to be quite surprised by what we discuss tomorrow. After ending the call, Maya felt lighter than she had since her father's death. Pierce's tone suggested he knew something Victoria didn't, something that might change everything. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't living in her car, where she might actually have some power in this situation. But that small flame of hope was nearly extinguished when she drove past the mansion that evening and saw Victoria's latest social media post in real time. Victoria was standing in the circular driveway next to a man in an expensive suit, shaking hands while photographers captured the moment. The caption made Maya's blood run cold. Exciting news. Just accepted an offer on the house. Sometimes you have to let go of the past to embrace an incredible future. The buyers are paying well above asking price because they love the property as much as Richard did. Closing in 30 days, and then it's off to my new penthouse downtown. Maya pulled over and read the post again, unable to believe what she was seeing. Victoria wasn't just taking over the house, she was selling it entirely. The home where Maya had lived for 8 years, where she had celebrated birthdays and holidays, where her father had read her bedtime stories and helped her with homework, would belong to strangers within a month. The comments were already pouring in from Victoria's friends. So exciting. You'll love downtown living. That house was too big for one person anyway. Smart move getting rid of all those memories. Maya sat in her car, staring at the mansion where lights blazed in every window. Victoria was probably inside right now, planning her new life with the money from the sale, money that had come from Maya's father's lifetime of hard work. The injustice of it made Maya feel physically sick. She was about to drive away when she heard voices from the front yard. Victoria was walking the potential buyers around the property, pointing out features and improvements with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved the place. But Maya could hear the lies in her stepmother's presentation. Richard always said this garden was his pride and joy, Victoria was saying, gesturing toward the rose bushes Maya's father had planted for her 16th birthday. He spent every weekend out here, tending to these flowers. It was a complete fabrication. Richard had been allergic to roses and avoided the garden entirely. Maya was the one who had maintained those flower beds, learning to prune and fertilize from YouTube videos because she wanted to honor her father's memory of her mother, who had loved roses. The pool area was Richard's favorite spot for entertaining, Victoria continued, leading the group toward the backyard. He hosted such wonderful dinner parties here. Another lie. Richard had been an introvert who preferred quiet evenings at home. The pool area had been Maya's domain, where she studied for exams and read novels during summer breaks. Maya realized she was witnessing Victoria's complete rewriting of history. Every memory, every truth about how they had actually lived in that house, was being replaced with fiction designed to make the sale more appealing. As she drove away, Maya felt something fundamental shift inside her. The grief that had consumed her for the past week was being joined by something sharper and more focused. Victoria wasn't just stealing Maya's inheritance. She was stealing her memories, her father's legacy, and the truth of who they had been as a family. But tomorrow morning, Maya would sit across from Jonathan Pierce and learn what her father had really planned. Victoria might have won the first battle with her lies and manipulation, but Maya was beginning to understand that the war was far from over. The business card on her dashboard caught the streetlight as she drove toward another night in the furniture store parking lot. Tomorrow, everything might change. Jonathan Pierce's law office occupied the top 3 floors of the Meridian building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered sweeping views of the city skyline. Maya had never been in such an impressive legal office, with its mahogany paneling, leather-bound law books, and original oil paintings that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. She felt out of place in her wrinkled clothes and scuffed shoes, but Pierce welcomed her with genuine warmth that immediately put her at ease. Pierce himself was exactly what Maya had expected from her father's lawyer. Distinguished silver hair, kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the sort of understated elegance that suggested both competence and integrity. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit that spoke of success without ostentation, and when he shook Maya's hand, his grip was firm and reassuring. "Please, sit wherever you're comfortable," Pierce said, gesturing toward a seating area with 2 leather chairs positioned near the windows. "Can I have Rebecca bring you some coffee? You look like you could use something warm." Maya gratefully accepted, wrapping her hands around the ceramic mug when it arrived and letting the heat seep through her fingers. She hadn't realized how cold she had become, both physically and emotionally, until she found herself in this sanctuary of warmth and professional concern. Pierce settled into the chair across from her, a thick manila folder balanced on his lap. "Maya, before we discuss your father's estate, I need you to understand something important. Your father came to see me approximately 6 months ago, and he was very concerned about your legal status within his family." Maya's heart began to race. What kind of legal status? Pierce opened the folder and pulled out a photograph that made Maya's breath catch in her throat. It showed her at 18, standing between her father and Victoria at Maya's high school graduation. But it wasn't the happy family photo she remembered. In this version, Victoria's smile looked forced, almost resentful, and she was positioned slightly apart from Maya and Richard, as if she didn't quite belong in the picture. "Your father brought me this photograph," Pierce explained. "He said he was starting to notice things about Victoria's behavior toward you that troubled him. He asked me to investigate the legal adoption paperwork that he believed had been completed when you were 16. Maya set down her coffee cup with trembling hands. "Adoption paperwork? Mr. Pierce, I was never formally adopted. Victoria always made that very clear. She said Dad felt sorry for me, but never made it official." Pierce's expression grew grave. "That's exactly what your father thought too, until he decided to verify the facts. Maya, your father did file adoption papers. Complete, legal adoption papers. They were submitted to the family court, processed, approved, and finalized on March 15th, 3 years ago." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She stared at Pierce, unable to process what he was telling her. "That's impossible. Victoria told me repeatedly that Dad never bothered with adoption. She said it was proof that I wasn't really family." Pierce pulled out a certified copy of legal documents that bore official seals and signatures. "Here's the court record, Maya. You were legally adopted by Richard Hartwell 3 years ago. Your legal name is Maya Hartwell, and according to the law, you are his daughter in every sense that matters." Maya took the documents with shaking hands, staring at her father's signature and her own. She remembered signing something around that time, but Victoria had told her it was just paperwork for Maya's college financial aid applications. She had trusted her stepmother completely, never imagining that Victoria was manipulating her understanding of what those documents actually meant. "But why didn't I know?" Maya whispered. "Why didn't Dad tell me?" Pierce's expression darkened. "Because Victoria intercepted all the official correspondence. The adoption certificates, the legal notifications, even the documentation that would have changed your driver's license and other identification. Your father only discovered this when he requested copies from the court 6 months ago. The scope of Victoria's deception was staggering. For 3 years, she had allowed Maya to believe she was merely a tolerated stepchild while actively hiding the legal reality that Maya was, in fact, Richard's adopted daughter with full inheritance rights. Pierce pulled out another set of documents, these ones bearing Richard's recent signature. When your father realized what Victoria had done, he immediately updated his will to account for this deception. He was very specific about protecting your interests, Maya. Very specific indeed. Maya felt dizzy as the implications began to sink in. If she was legally adopted, if she was Richard's daughter in the eyes of the law, then Victoria's entire narrative about Maya's lack of rights was built on lies. But how could Victoria not know about the adoption? Pierce seemed to read her thoughts. Your father believed Victoria knew exactly what she was doing. The adoption paperwork would have required her signature as Richard's spouse. She signed it, Maya. She knew you were being adopted, and she deliberately hid that fact from both you and your father. The betrayal was breathtaking in its calculation. Victoria hadn't just stumbled into this situation through ignorance or grief. She had methodically planned to deny Maya her legal rights, counting on Maya's ignorance of the law and her own position as the surviving spouse to carry out her scheme. Pierce pulled out his phone and showed Maya a news article from that morning's paper. Victoria had given an interview to the lifestyle section, positioning herself as the brave widow who was downsizing her life to cope with grief. The article painted her as a sympathetic figure who was selling the family home because it held too many painful memories. She's creating a public narrative, Pierce explained. If this were to go to court, she wants to appear as the grieving widow making difficult but necessary decisions. She's establishing herself as the sole rightful heir in the public consciousness. But Maya could see through Victoria's strategy now. The social media posts, the interviews, even the way she had handled Maya's eviction, all of it was designed to create the appearance of legitimacy. Victoria was betting that Maya would disappear quietly, either because she didn't know her rights or because she lacked the resources to fight back. Mr. Pierce, Maya said slowly, trying to organize her thoughts, if I'm legally adopted, what does that mean for the inheritance? Pierce smiled for the first time since Maya had arrived, and it was the kind of smile that suggested Victoria was about to have a very bad day. Maya, as Richard's legally adopted daughter, you are entitled to a significant portion of his estate under state inheritance law. But more importantly, your father's updated will makes you the primary beneficiary of almost everything. The relief that flooded through Maya was so intense, she felt lightheaded. Everything Victoria had told her, every cruel assertion about Maya's lack of rights and claims, had been carefully constructed lies designed to steal what legally belonged to Maya. There's something else, Pierce continued, his smile growing broader. Your father was a very thorough man. When he discovered Victoria's deception about the adoption papers, he began investigating other areas where she might have been, shall we say, less than honest. What we found was quite illuminating. Pierce pulled out bank statements and financial records that made Maya's eyes widen. Victoria had been systematically moving money out of joint accounts and into accounts solely in her name, apparently preparing for Richard's death long before it actually occurred. The college fund that Victoria claimed had been frozen due to suspected fraud? Victoria had emptied it herself just 2 days after the funeral. She stole everything, Maya whispered, staring at the evidence of Victoria's financial manipulation. She tried to steal everything, Pierce corrected. But your father was more careful than she realized. The house, the investment accounts, even the life insurance policies, all of them have provisions that specifically protect your inheritance rights. Victoria may have access to some assets as the surviving spouse, but the bulk of the estate belongs to you. Maya felt tears of relief and gratitude streaming down her face. Her father had protected her even when she didn't know she needed protection. Despite Victoria's lies and manipulation, despite the legal complexities Maya could never have navigated alone, Richard had ensured that his daughter would be taken care of. What happens now? Maya asked. Pierce began organizing the documents back into his folder, his movements quick and efficient. Now we file the appropriate paperwork with the probate court. We notify Victoria that her understanding of the inheritance situation was incorrect. And we begin the process of getting you what your father intended you to have. As Maya left Pierce's office that afternoon, she felt transformed. The desperate, homeless girl who had entered the building no longer existed. In her place stood Maya Hartwell, legally adopted daughter and rightful heir, armed with the truth and the legal power to reclaim her life. Victoria had declared war on the wrong person. She just didn't know it yet. Over the next 5 days, Maya's entire world transformed in ways she could never have imagined. Jonathan Pierce had arranged for her to stay in a small but comfortable hotel suite near his office, paid for by what he called an emergency disbursement from her father's estate. For the first time since Richard's death, Maya slept in a real bed, ate regular meals, and began to feel human again. Pierce's office had become Maya's second home as they methodically built their case against Victoria. The lawyer worked with the focused intensity of a man who had discovered a particularly satisfying puzzle, and each new piece of evidence seemed to delight him more than the last. "Your father was even more thorough than I initially realized," Pierce explained during their third meeting, spreading documents across his massive conference table like a general planning a military campaign. "Look at this." He handed Maya a sealed envelope that bore her name in her father's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter dated just 2 weeks before Richard's fatal heart attack, written in the precise script Maya remembered from childhood birthday cards and homework help sessions. "My dearest Maya," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then Victoria has likely revealed her true nature, and I am no longer there to protect you. I have suspected for some time that the woman I married is not the person she pretended to be. This letter contains information that I pray you will never need, but I cannot risk leaving you defenseless against someone who has proven capable of shocking deception." Maya's hands trembled as she continued reading. Her father detailed his growing suspicions about Victoria's behavior, her secretive financial activities, and most damning of all, her deliberate concealment of Maya's adoption status. Richard had been quietly investigating Victoria for months before his death, documenting evidence of her manipulation and preparing for exactly the situation Maya now found herself in. He hired a private investigator, Pierce revealed, producing another thick folder. "Maya, your father documented everything. Victoria's hidden bank accounts, her communications with Derek about getting rid of you after Richard's death, even her consultation with a lawyer about challenging your inheritance rights before your father died." The scope of Victoria's premeditation was staggering. She hadn't simply taken advantage of Richard's death, she had been planning Maya's destruction for months, possibly years. Every kind gesture, every family dinner where Victoria had seemed merely distant rather than hostile, had been carefully calculated performance. But Pierce's most devastating revelation came when he pulled out printouts of Victoria's social media activity from the past week. Maya had seen the posts in real time, but Pierce had been systematically documenting them as evidence of what he called asset dissipation and callous disregard for the decedent's wishes. "Look at this timeline," Pierce said, arranging the printouts chronologically. 3 days after your father's funeral, Victoria posts about redecorating his office. 5 days later, she's showing off expensive purchases. A week later, she announces the house sale. "This isn't grief, Maya. This is celebration." The posts told a story of someone who viewed Richard's death as liberation rather than loss. Victoria bragging about finally having space for her clothes, about making design decisions without compromise, about starting her new life. Every caption and comment painted her as someone who had been constrained by her marriage rather than enriched by it. Pierce had also discovered something that made Maya's stomach turn. Derek and his friends hadn't just filmed their harassment of Maya for social media entertainment. They had posted the videos on multiple platforms, creating a digital record of their cruelty that would be impossible to deny in court. "Their own arrogance is going to destroy them," Pierce said with obvious satisfaction. Harrison Blackwood posted a video of them going through your belongings with the caption, "Watching Derek's mom clean house and get rid of the deadweight." "That's evidence of intentional infliction of emotional distress, Maya." They documented their own crimes. But Victoria's most damaging mistake came when she began giving interviews about her brave new life as a widow. She had spoken to 3 different lifestyle magazines, each time embellishing the story of her generous tolerance of Maya's extended stay in the family home. In one particularly damning interview, Victoria claimed she had supported Maya financially for years out of pure charity. She told Metropolitan Living magazine that you were a financial burden your father felt obligated to carry, Pierce explained, highlighting specific quotes with a yellow marker. She said, and I quote, "Richard was too kind-hearted to make the difficult decisions about Maya's future, so I'm doing what he couldn't bring himself to do." Maya stared at the article, recognizing the calculated cruelty in Victoria's word choices. She was establishing a narrative where Richard had been weak and Maya had been parasitic, positioning herself as the strong decision-maker who was finally setting appropriate boundaries. The irony, Pierce continued with a smile that suggested Victoria was about to have a very unpleasant surprise, is that every one of these statements contradicts the actual legal reality. She's creating evidence that she knew Maya had been living in the house for years, that she understood Maya considered it home, and that her eviction was deliberate and punitive rather than legally justified. Pierce had spent the week gathering additional evidence from unexpected sources. The locksmith Victoria had hired to change the house locks had been willing to testify that Victoria had specifically instructed him to ensure Maya could never enter the property again. The bank manager who had frozen Maya's college fund confirmed that Victoria had requested the action immediately after Richard's funeral before any investigation could have been initiated. Even Victoria's interior designer had provided damaging testimony. Victoria had hired the woman to completely redecorate the house within weeks of Richard's death, specifically requesting that all traces of Maya's presence be removed. She had told the designer that she wanted the house to reflect her taste alone, that she was finally free to create the home she had always wanted. Every conversation, every decision, every social media post was building a case that Victoria had viewed Richard's death not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. The grief she had displayed at the funeral had been as carefully constructed as everything else about her public persona. Pierce had scheduled depositions with Derek and his friends, subpoenaed Victoria's financial records, and prepared motions that would freeze her assets pending resolution of the inheritance dispute. The legal machinery was grinding into motion with inexorable efficiency. But the most satisfying moment came when Pierce handed Maya the court documents that would officially notify Victoria that her understanding of the inheritance situation had been catastrophically wrong. "These papers will be served tomorrow evening," Pierce explained. "I've arranged for the process server to deliver them during Victoria's house showing party. She's hosting potential buyers and real estate agents to celebrate the pending sale." It seemed like the perfect time to let her know that the house isn't actually hers to sell. Maya imagined Victoria's face when she realized that everything she had worked for, every cruel calculation and manipulative gesture, had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the legal reality. The woman who had systematically destroyed Maya's life was about to discover that she had never held the power she thought she possessed. As Maya left Pierce's office that evening, she carried copies of all the evidence they had assembled: bank records, legal documents, social media printouts, witness statements, and her father's own written testimony about Victoria's deceptions. The briefcase felt heavy in her hands, weighted with the power to restore justice and reclaim her inheritance. Tomorrow, Victoria would learn that her victims sometimes fight back, and when they do, they come prepared for war. Victoria's celebration party was everything Maya had expected it would be. Through the mansion's large windows, Maya could see the glittering crowd of wealthy socialites, real estate agents, and potential buyers mingling in the grand foyer where she had once felt safe and loved. Crystal champagne flutes caught the light from the massive chandelier, and Victoria moved through the crowd like a queen holding court, accepting congratulations on her successful transition to widowhood. Maya sat in the passenger seat of Jonathan Pierce's Mercedes, parked strategically across the street where they had a perfect view of the front entrance. Pierce checked his watch with the satisfaction of a man whose meticulous planning was about to pay spectacular dividends. "The process server should arrive in exactly 3 minutes," Pierce said, adjusting his tie with the care of someone preparing for battle. "I specifically requested that he wait until Victoria was surrounded by witnesses before delivering the papers." Through the windows, Maya could see Victoria wearing a stunning red cocktail dress that probably cost more than Maya's entire wardrobe. Her stepmother was gesturing animatedly toward the grand staircase, no doubt explaining to potential buyers how she was selling, because the house held too many painful memories. The performance was flawless, designed to extract maximum sympathy and justify the elevated asking price. Derek stood near the marble fireplace, holding court with Harrison and Sophia while they sipped expensive wine and laughed at some private joke. Maya wondered if they were reminiscing about their harassment of her, turning her humiliation into entertaining dinner party conversation for their privileged circle. A plain sedan pulled into the driveway, and Maya's pulse quickened as she recognized the process server Piers had hired. He was a compact man in his 50s who carried himself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to delivering unpleasant surprises to people who thought themselves untouchable. "Here we go," Pierce murmured, pulling out his phone to record what was about to unfold. The process server entered the house with polite determination, approaching Victoria directly despite the crowd of guests surrounding her. Maya could see Victoria's confusion turn to alarm as the man introduced himself and handed her the legal documents. The effect was immediate and devastating. Victoria's face went from mild confusion to shock to something approaching panic as she scanned the first page of the court filing. Her champagne flute slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering against the marble floor and sending crystal shards sparkling across the foyer. The guests closest to Victoria stopped their conversations, sensing that something significant was happening. Derek pushed through the crowd to his mother's side, his expression shifting from annoyance to concern as he saw Victoria's pale, stricken face. Maya couldn't hear the words being exchanged, but she could read the body language perfectly. Victoria was shaking her head repeatedly, pointing at the documents as if their existence was somehow impossible. Derek grabbed the papers from his mother's hands, and Maya watched his confidence evaporate as he read the legal notification that his entire understanding of their situation had been catastrophically wrong. The process server departed with professional efficiency, leaving Victoria standing in the center of her celebration party, holding proof that everything she had worked for was built on lies. The crowd of potential buyers and socialites began to murmur among themselves, sensing drama, but not yet understanding its scope. Victoria's real estate agent, a polished woman in her 40s who had been confidently discussing closing dates just minutes earlier, approached Victoria with growing concern. Maya could see her asking questions, trying to understand why her client suddenly looked like she had seen a ghost. It was Derek who provided the answer, his voice carrying clearly through the mansion's acoustics even from across the street. "Mother, this says Maya was legally adopted. It says she's Dad's heir, not you." The silence that followed was so complete that Maya could practically hear the collective intake of breath from 50 wealthy socialites, simultaneously realizing they were witnessing a spectacular fall from grace. Victoria's voice, when it came, was a hoarse whisper that somehow carried the weight of complete devastation. "That's impossible. She was never adopted. I would have known. I would have had to sign papers." But the legal documents Pierce had prepared were thorough and undeniable. They included copies of the adoption decree, Richard's updated will, evidence of Victoria's asset manipulation, and most damaging of all, documentation proving that Victoria had indeed signed the adoption papers and then systematically concealed their existence from both Maya and Richard. The crowd began to shift uncomfortably as Derek read selected passages aloud, his voice growing higher and more strained with each revelation. She inherited everything? The house, the investments, everything goes to Maya? But that means that means Mother doesn't actually own any of this. Victoria's carefully constructed world was collapsing in real time, witnessed by everyone whose opinion she valued. The real estate agent was already backing away, recognizing that the house sale she had been negotiating was legally impossible. The potential buyers were exchanging glances that suggested they were witnessing exactly the kind of family drama they preferred to avoid. But the worst was yet to come. Pierce had included social media printouts with the court filing, and as Derek continued reading, he discovered his mother's own words being used as evidence against her. Her posts about finally being free, her interviews about Maya being a financial burden, her bragging about expensive purchases made with money that legally belonged to Maya. "You told Metropolitan Living that Maya was parasitic?" Derek read in horror. "You said Dad was too weak to make difficult decisions about her. Mother, this makes you look like you planned all of this before Dad even died." Victoria snatched the documents back from Derek, scanning them frantically, as if she might find some escape clause hidden in the legal language. But Pierce's work was thorough and devastating. Every cruel social media post, every manipulative interview, every financial transaction that had seemed so clever at the time was now evidence of Victoria's systematic theft and emotional abuse. The mansion's front door opened, and Maya watched as several guests quietly departed, unwilling to be associated with what was clearly becoming a major legal scandal. Victoria's social circle, built on shared wealth and status, was already beginning to distance itself from someone who had become a liability. Harrison and Sophia huddled near the entrance, clearly uncomfortable with the drama unfolding around them. Maya could see them whispering urgently, probably planning their own exit strategy. The videos they had made mocking Maya's poverty were mentioned specifically in the legal documents as evidence of intentional infliction of emotional distress. Victoria's real estate agent approached her one final time, speaking in urgent whispers that Maya couldn't hear but could easily interpret. The woman was clearly explaining that the house sale was now impossible, that the listing would have to be withdrawn, and that there would likely be significant legal complications ahead. When the agent left, Victoria was truly alone for the first time since Richard's death. Derek stood beside her, but he seemed more shocked than supportive, still processing the reality that his expected inheritance had never actually existed. The remaining guests were maintaining careful distance, treating Victoria like someone with a contagious disease. Pierce started his car with obvious satisfaction. "I think that went quite well," he said, pulling away from their vantage point. "The legal notification has been served. The assets will be frozen pending resolution, and Victoria now understands the true scope of her legal jeopardy." As they drove toward downtown, Maya felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief, certainly, that her father's protections were finally activated. Satisfaction that Victoria's cruelty was being exposed and punished. But also a strange sadness for the family she had thought she belonged to, even though that family had been built on lies and manipulation. The court proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. Victoria's attempts to challenge the adoption documents failed when Pierce produced bank records proving she had been present for every legal filing. Her claims that Maya was manipulating the system collapsed when Richard's private investigator testified about months of documented evidence showing Victoria's deceptions. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who clearly had little patience for Victoria's theatrical protestations of innocence, delivered her ruling with clinical precision. Maya's adoption was valid, Richard's will was legally binding, and Victoria had engaged in systematic theft and asset manipulation that warranted both civil and criminal investigation. Within 2 weeks, Maya found herself standing in the foyer of her childhood home, now legally and unequivocally hers. The house felt different somehow, larger and more peaceful than it had when Victoria's presence filled it with tension and calculated cruelty. Victoria and Derek had been given 30 days to remove their belongings and vacate the premises. Maya had watched through the window as they loaded boxes into a moving truck, their movements lacking the confident arrogance that had characterized their earlier disposal of Maya's possessions. Derek's expensive car had been repossessed when Pierce's investigation revealed it had been purchased with money stolen from Maya's inheritance. The final moment of justice came when Maya offered Victoria something her stepmother had never shown her: genuine mercy. As Victoria prepared to leave the house for the last time, Maya approached her with an offer that demonstrated everything Victoria had failed to understand about family and forgiveness. "Victoria," Maya said quietly, her voice steady and strong, "there's a guest house on the property. If you need somewhere to stay while you figure out your next steps, you're welcome to use it temporarily." Victoria stared at Maya with something approaching bewilderment, as if kindness from her former victim was incomprehensible. The woman who had thrown Maya out with such cold calculation couldn't seem to process being offered shelter by the person she had tried to destroy. In the months that followed, Maya transformed the mansion into something her father would have been proud of. She established a foundation for young adults who had lost parents, providing housing assistance and legal advocacy for people facing exactly the situation Victoria had tried to force on Maya. The house became a place of healing rather than conflict, filled with the warmth and generosity that Richard had always valued. Victoria never used the guest house. She disappeared from Maya's life as completely as she had tried to erase Maya from hers, moving to another state where her reputation hadn't been destroyed by her own cruelty and greed. But Maya kept the offer open anyway, because she had learned something Victoria never understood. True family isn't about legal documents or inherited wealth. It's about choosing to love and protect each other, even when that protection comes at personal cost. Maya's father had understood this lesson, and in the end, his love had proven stronger than all of Victoria's carefully laid plans. The last thing Maya did was restore her father's office exactly as he had left it, complete with the family photos Victoria had tried to throw away. In the place of honor on his desk, she kept the letter he had written her, proof that sometimes love really can reach beyond death to protect the people who matter most. What do you think about this incredible journey from powerlessness to justice? Have you ever experienced a moment when someone underestimated you completely, only to discover you had more strength than they realized? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about how this story of hidden family bonds and ultimate vindication resonated with you.